Welcome to the April meeting of the San Mateo County Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Commissions. I'm Monroe Luis. I'm the chair of the commissions, and welcome. We're going to get started. I'll call the meeting to order. And first, I just want to note for anyone who is on Zoom and is interested in Spanish translation and or interpretation, we do have that service provided by the county now. So we do have interpreters on the Zoom. Unfortunately, we can't do it for anyone in the room, but we can do it for Zoom. So Vice Chair Nori, could you do roll call for commissioners?
Sure. Commissioner LaPuisse.
Present.
Commissioner Liu.
Present.
Commissioner, I am here. Commissioner Huber Levy.
Present.
Commissioner Bocanegra.
Present.
Commissioner Bustos.
Here.
Commissioner Sothignori.
Here.
Commissioner Rasmussen.
Here.
Commissioner Swope.
Here.
Commissioner Uhila. Commissioner Wilson.
Here.
And I think that's it.
Okay, great. I think that establishes a quorum. So we will get started. And just to clarify, I think according to the new sort of terms for voting on the commission, only commissioners that are in the room are allowed to vote.
I think it's also counted for absences, for attendance. Only commissioners in person are technically counted for attendance.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, we've got a few commissioners that are on Zoom, and thank you for zooming in if you've had, other arrangements or difficulty getting here in person. But just wanted to clarify that for when we do have a vote. And the first. Actually, before we get started, we have quite a few visitors in the room, and we appreciate you all being here. We'll get to Q&A with Chief Keene later. We sent a letter to Chief Keene last month, and we were hoping that he would come, but we didn't know we would get so many other visitors. Yeah. But we appreciate you being here. And if you wouldn't mind, maybe for people that are on the Zoom, you could just introduce yourself.
Probation. Bonnie McCaskill, Assistant Chief. Clark, Probation.
Ms. Clark.
Hey there, I'm Peter Cruz. I'm the Deputy County Attorney side of the Probation Department.
Yeah. I'm John Niblin. I'm the County Attorney. I guess I'm assigned to the county, but I work with Peter, and I just got a great deal of interest in what y'all do here. So I'm here to learn. Thank you.
Rosalo's Probation.
Welcome.
Welcome.
I know that Judith Halver, who's also county counsel and council commission, said that she may be attending and maybe she's on the Zoom. Judith, are you there?
I think she indicated to me she planned to be here. She may just be on traffic.
Okay. Chief Keene is making his way as well.
And I just wanted to flag that Judith was recently selected to become a chief in our office. A chief.
Congratulations, Judith.
She's definitely been a great partner to the commission. So
yeah.
Does
that mean we're losing her?
Yeah, are we losing her?
It does not mean that, no.
Thank you. Welcome. Good to see you. Thank you for being here and making your way up the stairs of the elevator despite the recent knee surgery. Good to see you. Okay, with those introductions done, we will move on to the first order of business, which is to approve our minutes from our March meeting.
I move approval. A second.
Great. Any discussion on the minutes? Any edits or changes? Okay, hearing none from commissioners, we'll have a voice vote to approve. All in favor of approving the minutes for March?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, great. The March minutes are approved. Likewise, we need to review our agenda and approve that. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move, yeah, I second that.
Great. Any commissioners wish to change anything in the agenda or comment? Any errors? Okay, hearing none, then all in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, great. The agenda is approved. Just one quick announcement. In this part of the agenda, often we will swear in new commissioners or have a vote for new commissioners. We did vote last month to recommend a new commissioner, and I think that in a matter of days that's going to work its way through the process, and Whitney Ginevra will be able to be sworn in next month. But she's not ready to be sworn in yet. Just FYI for everyone. Okay, now moving on to part 2 of the agenda. At this point, we pause to ask if there are any members of the public that would like to make public comment on items that are not on the agenda. If there's anything that the public would like to bring to our attention that's not already coming up on the agenda, you can, now's the time to make comment. Does Clara have her name? Clara, do you have your hand up as well?
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't see because the record button is hiding it. Ms. Jocko, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to emphasize again, I know this has been an ongoing topic, but how important it is for the children at the YSC to have full access to all the programs that are required by law, starting with but not limited to the recommendations made in your commission's annual inspections report. And we really need this so that they have the support that's fitting and necessary for their status as youth and can be appropriately treated in the system as youth. Which is really critical for setting them up for the best chance for success in their family and community on their return. So I just wanted to urge once more that we start by putting the recommendations from the inspections into practice as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Goodbine, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, thanks, Monroe. And thank you guys all for what you're doing, you on the JJDPC and also the supporting groups from the county and the community. I'm Nancy Goodman. I'm from Redwood City. I'm a member of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Redwood City. And I was a part of a group of 10 people that met with DA Wagstaff April 14th to ask him to stop transferring youth to adult court. This is something that the Democratic Party has voted in favor of. We've got 15 other organizations that have voted in favor of that. And we represented the faith community in our care. ACLU, People Power, Democracy for America, and Silicon Valley Debug. So the reason was because we really think there's a lot of reasons not to try in adult court, and understanding that they need to be held accountable for their bad decisions and especially for the terrible harm that they may have caused. But at the same time, we just need to recognize they're young and impressionable and deserve rehab. So the justice system recognizes that, the Supreme Court recognizes that, and science recognizes that these people do not have capacity for decision making, avoiding having impulse control, avoiding peer pressure, and so on, that we expect of older people. And it doesn't work anyway. It doesn't deter crime, and it doesn't reduce recidivism. And I think really fundamentally, morally, if you look at what Brian Stevenson says from the Equal Justice Institute, he basically says, we're all more than the worst thing that we've ever done. We are all, each of us, more than the worst thing that we've ever done. So no matter how bad the thing is the kid did, they should not be thrown away. And it's also just civil rights. I mean, virtually every single one of these kids is a kid of color. So the thing is, the DA said, the probation report often says they can't provide sufficient services to rehabilitate the kids here in the YSC. And so as a result, he sends them off to adult court and adult prison, because he says maybe there they can get rehab. They won't get better on their own. But fundamentally, we just don't think these kids should be the victims if our county is failing to provide the services that are required by law. These kids are in our care. They're our legal and moral obligation. So that's why I'm here, is I do want to hear from Chief Keen why it is that we're not able to provide rehab services, because we want to help the DA get to a yes on this. He says he spends a lot of energy looking at the probation recommendations, and those recommendations generally lead him to send the kid to adult court. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Goodman. Becca Keeler, I see your hand up as well. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Becca Keeler. I live in North Fair Oaks and I'm a co-founder of In Our Care. We at In Our Care are in total agreement that youth need to be held accountable for their actions, but there's a reason that youth are no longer charged as adults at 7 years of age, which used to happen here in the US in the 1700s. Science and the Supreme Court agree that they are not fully mature in any sense of the word, but they also agree that they're very amenable to rehabilitation and restorative justice, and that is what they need. So we're often told that charging children as adults is about public safety, but the statistics show us that recidivism rates are higher amongst youth that are sentenced to adult prison instead of rehabilitated in youth facilities. On April 14th, I was also part of the group that Nancy Goodman just spoke about, and I won't go over the people that were there because she's already done that. But what the DA, one of the other things that the DA told us there is that probation is not providing the services to rehabilitate these youth at the YSC, and that's a major reason that he may be charging them as adults. And I wouldn't agree with him that prison is a good substitute for rehabilitation services, but the lack of services is our fault. It's not these kids. And it's my understanding that it is probation's job to rehabilitate these children. That's a major purpose of probation. So let's provide them with these services that are mandated by law. Let's provide them now. They're in our care. It's our legal and moral obligation to take care of them, to allow them the opportunity to come back into our community in better shape than when they left it. These are not throwaway children. What I ask of this group, and I ask of the Chief Keen, what is needed to make this happen? Tell us what's needed, and let the community work with you to make this happen for the kids now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keeler. Did Ms. Hahn, do you have, I'm sorry, I can't tell from the screen in here, but did you have your hand up or? No, it doesn't look like it.
No, Monroe, I didn't.
Okay, thank you. You popped up to the top, you know, the first spot in the screen, but there's a button there that's hiding maybe your hand. So I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, Nadia. All right, great. If there's no other public comment, then we will move on to section 3 of our agenda. Usually at our monthly meetings, we hear from our partners in various agencies in the county who give us updates of what's going on in the juvenile system. And one person who gives us that update regularly is Ron Reyes from the Private Defender group. Ron, you're up first. Go ahead.
Hi, Monroe. Unfortunately, today I cannot provide the statistics I usually do it. My administrative assistant had an emergency and she's been out of the office for a few days. So at the next meeting, I will update the commission on the numbers for the last 2 months, for April and May. Okay,
thank you, Ron. Is there anything anecdotally that you want to add about how the month has gone? Any other information that you can provide us?
What I can just briefly share with you, we had roughly around 40 new assignments of cases in the last 4 weeks. And then I would, 10 of them, approximately 10 of them contain allegations of 707B offenses. Also, of those 6 were petitions for violation of probation. So that's kind of roughly based on the notes that I track. That's not based on our reports that we generate and I share with them. But just to kind of give you an idea on that. The other numbers I unfortunately do not have. And then Senate bills SB 448 was before the Senate, and now it's with the appropriation that was on the consent. That's a bill that addresses some of the issues with detention of out of county youth. So that's we'll see how that's going. So far, it looks good.
Okay, thank you, Ron.
Sure.
Do any commissioners have any questions for Ron? Okay, Ron, thank you. It sounds to me like, if I recall correctly, those numbers are not unusually high compared to the previous month, and it doesn't sound like it was an unusual month compared to recent trends, if I could generalize.
Yes, I think it would just been kind of consistent. Roughly, it's about the same what it's been the last couple of months.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, next on our agenda is Shelley Johnson from the County Office of Education. Shelley, are you on the Zoom?
Yes, hi, good evening, Monroe, I'm here.
Shelley, go ahead. We talked about you maybe giving us a little update about what's going on in the schools.
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, everybody. So I'm Shelley Johnson. I'm the principal of Court and Community Schools for San Mateo County Office of Education. So I'll take the big stuff and then I'll get to the good stuff surrounding the students. So big picture items, we are finalizing our strategic planning, which will guide our plans, whether it's LCAP, SIPSA, WASC, and getting all of our teacher input, staff input across the board. Dr. Watson is leading that work for the next 2 sessions in terms of giving us a racial equity lens as we dive into this work and give our input about what's working on the school side versus what isn't working for students. Then I'm going to transition in. We had a breakfast for our court and community students where we had a student survey that reflected our metrics for LCAP. And so a couple of summary metrics for the majority of students. About 85% felt that they were respected in school, that mental health was a benefit to them, and about 75% of students made a connection with project-based learning and helping them better grasp academic concepts. Of course, you know, that's not as high as I would like, so definitely we'll go for another year to try even harder for our young people. And then we're getting into the metrics of our LCAP and just had our board review where we're looking at the essence of the goals for universal understanding, which led me where I just got back from a conference, a leadership conference for Carnegie Leadership in San Diego, where the entire conference was embedded about how to have a universal framework of understanding for students, families, additional stakeholders, and teaching staff across the board. And what are we really measuring for our young people? So I'm excited about that, diving into that work a little bit more next year. As far as student programming, it's our 4th quarter of the school year. Our last day of school is June 2nd. So our positive psychology course with Project Change, that will be concluding in the next few weeks. We finalized San Mateo Credit Union financial literacy programming, but still have the larger interactive where probation has agreed to collaborate with us. So I'm very excited when that happens, probably in the next month. Then we're going into, we have a new service provider through PCRC in San Mateo who will be assisting us with delivering our TUPE content, where that is tobacco use prevention education. And they'll be adding additional topics such as anti-bullying and how drug and alcohol also works hand in hand with tobacco use. So I'm excited about next steps in that collab with PCRC. And then Success Center will have our first coding class this Friday during study skills. So I'm very excited to see students' enthusiasm regarding that program. And then last but not least, we're going to have some so this summer we have 2 summer sessions as per usual. The first session will be a credit recovery camp because we have a lot of seniors to serve, and we want to ensure that as many students can cross the finish line as possible and celebrate in the larger graduation ceremony. So that ceremony is pushed back to June 30th this year. But our ultimate goal in that credit recovery camp is to ensure that every senior, to the best of their ability and to the best of our ability, can cross that finish line. And then we just solidified some programming for second session at the Juvenile Hall, where it's going to be digitized storytelling through UC Santa Barbara. And I'm really enthusiastic about that because even though it is online, I feel like it's going to be really powerful with students having mentors and be able to produce those visuals with higher end literature, excuse me. And I'm excited to see the creativity of our students and our staff working in collaboration with UC Santa Barbara. And then last but not least, our fall programming, we have locked in 2 in-person courses with Project Change, which is English 105, and then also an art class for the first time in person. So I'm very much looking forward to see if our graduates, along with our students that qualify for concurrent enrollment for those courses, to see what all the beautiful writing that will be achieved along with all the amazing art. So that concludes the school department summary. Thank you for giving me this time, Monroe. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. That is a lot. There's a lot in that update and a lot for us to absorb. Do any commissioners have any questions?
I have a question.
Commissioner Rasmussen, go ahead.
Ms. Johnson, just for clarification, are those programs at Gateway, or are they in the institution, or are they at Camp? Can you explain where those programs are, the ones that you just mentioned, where they're actually going to be taking place?
Yes, thank you for that. No problem at all. So 2Bay is going to be with one facilitator down at Gateway, and then we have a different facilitator at Hillcrest. So we still have Alejandro to support us at Gateway, and then we have Reno, who's going to be supporting the Hillcrest and Kemp students for that 2Bay programming, along with the anti-bullying, along with some drug and alcohol information. And then with Project Change, those courses that I mentioned, all 3 current and in future, are just for Kemp and Hillcrest. Still need to work with the coordinator, Nick Jasso, about some potential offerings for Gateway. But what we're noticing is we have a lot of 9th graders this year. Depending on our senior interest for this upcoming year, we'll determine some more concurrent opportunities for the community school students versus dual enrollments that we do at the court schools. As far as I'm trying to think here if there are any other programming.
Recordar si existe otra parte de la programación.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't want to interrupt. I know.
Sí, no quise
I
interrumpir.
apologize. Yeah.
Disculpe.
We're having some of the Spanish interpretation seems to be coming through the main audio instead of the interpretation channel. Go ahead, Shelley.
And then, oh yeah, no problem. I just want to make sure I wasn't interrupting the interpreter. Then as far as financial literacy, that has only been at the court schools. The hope is that we can have that at Gateway for the fall semester. But one thing I should have added, Joanne, which my apologies to the commissioners, is that we also have, whether we have financial literacy at the hall, we also have the Fly mentors that just started working with our Gateway students last week. So I'm excited that the community school students, where they didn't get the financial literacy, they're starting to make official connections with the Fly mentors. So I'm excited to see that blossom.
And the start date of the financial literacy was?
It was approximately 11 weeks ago. So the big project will be happening. So technically it's a 12-week course. So you have to, excuse me, no, it was 14 weeks ago. We had to skip a couple of weeks because the Gustavo was busy with some other endeavors as he was onboarding different school programs. So we lost a couple of weeks, but he's going to circle back with us for the final project that we're collaborating on with the with probation to support the students in a live financial opportunity where every student gets a scenario and that they get to see a reality of a budget. And so I'm really excited to see the students engaged in that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson.
Not at all. Thank you for the questions.
Before we go on to other, I think number one, Kenya, needs to be assigned to the Spanish channel. There were two people that needed to be, there was number one.
Do you want to come out and read that?
Kimberly and number one, Kenya. Okay. Mr. Wilson, I think you had a question for Ms. Johnson as well.
Okay, I have three quick questions, hopefully. The first is the Fly mentors. What does mentoring mean?
Primera pregunta quiere decir, ¿qué quiere decir ser mentor?
Great question. So the simple version is that they work with students basically to talk to them about their transition, to see, you know, is there anything that you need advocacy on that they can help bridge gaps with the school department?
Okay, great, thank you. The second question.
Oh, I think she had more. Shelley, did you have more to say about that?
Oh no, I didn't mean to be rude. Thank you for that. No, they're just, and in addition, they also take the students out on evening activities along with the weekend, so the students have some great activities, positive linkage in the community, and that also I always think that that's wonderful in terms of building the self-esteem and making more connections with adults that are advocates for the students, so that relationship transitions as they go back to their respective school districts.
Awesome, thank you. How long is credit recovery camp, and what will other students be doing who are in good standing, you know, in terms of credit recovery?
Great question. So two things. Most students across the board do need credit recovery camp. That's going to be approximately 19 days. ESY 1 is a 4-week session, but we have Juneteenth off. So it's 19 days in total. And so students will get that custom plan. As far as students that don't need that, we have one graduate where we just collaborated with probation to pay for his asynchronous electrician journeyman coursework. So I'm excited to see how he enjoys that. We some of the students are also working on a vocational a virtual vocational fair where they're working with our academic counselor to research, invite, and plan an online vocational program with everything from plumbing to electricians union to have HVAC. So I'm excited to see what speakers they have for that virtual vocational career fair in the summer as well. And then they'll be meeting with also some Nick Jasso to see what other online programming they're interested in, if they're not interested in the in-person programming, to see if there's a last minute accelerated online course for the summertime if graduates wanted to take on those electives. But I'll know more about that next week.
The vocational fair sounds awesome. Like,
yes, I'm really excited to see.
Great example of project-based learning. And I just want to thank you for doing getting feedback from the youth in terms of whether they feel connected to teachers, etc. That's great.
No problem. Yeah, I agree. We have to figure this out so we can do better. So I appreciate it.
That's the best report I've ever heard. Thank you, Shelley.
No problem. No problem.
Thank you, Shelley. Okay, if there aren't any other questions for Ms. Johnson, then we will keep moving in section 3 of our agenda. Okay, the 3C refers to Children and Family Services. Often Director Fong is able to be here to give us an update. He let me know ahead of time that he was not able to join us this month, but I did note in the agenda, I just want to call to everyone's attention that he did submit his usual written report, which is in the agenda packet. So if there's more information about the dependency side of the system that commissioners and the public are interested in, it's in the agenda packet at the bottom. Yeah. And so we usually finish this part of our agenda with updates from Ms. Clark and Ms. Stauffer before she was retired, to hear what's going on in supervised probation and also in the hall and camp. So Ms. Clark, we'd love to hear your update on the latest of what's happening in your area.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So as you said, Melanie is retired, so we're still figuring out who's taking over the hall. But as far as our juvenile stats, we have 181 total cases on diversion and court probation, 134 on supervision, whether that's formal or informal, for a total of 315. We still remain to have 0 in placement, 3 that are on AB 12. We had 11 new case referrals for assessment and under contracts. And our top 5 cases this month have been battery, assault and battery, assault with a deadly weapon, grand theft, and firearms. And at the juvenile hall, we have 32 total that are in the juvenile hall, 29 males, 2 females, and 1 trans. And 4 youth at Camp, 3 being from our county, 1 from Sonoma, and 17 youth on EMP.
Can you just repeat for me the number of youth at YSC? I didn't hear. 32. 32? Okay, thank you. So that's the second month.
Yes.
I think last month it was also over 30, right? I think last month you said, also said it was over 30.
I believe it was, when I reported, I think it might have been 38.
Earlier in the year, it was in the 20s.
Yeah, it's been
in the sort of 30s level recently, right?
Yes. This year, I thought I heard 72.
No, 30.
32.
32.
That's a big difference. Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions from commissioners about those stats or any other questions from Ms. Clark? Before Commissioner Liu.
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, before in Camp there were 2 youth from San Mateo County and 2 from Sonoma. Can I ask which county? So 1 Sonoma County youth returned and or left, and 1 San Mateo County youth joined?
Yeah.
I wanted to make a, may I speak?
Sure.
I wanted to make, Ms. Clark, it's always nice to see you. I wanted to make a clarifying point. It came to my attention during a recent visit with staff that they had watched our YouTube meeting, and that when we use the term probation, that they personalize that, and that they think that we are speaking about them personally. And so I talked with them and made it very clear that that's exactly what we're not doing, and how much we appreciate what they do for the kids, because we realize that they are the front line. They are the ones working with the kids. They are the ones who are, going out of their way to make sure that they get what they can offer. As I explained to them, our issues are programming and all that. That's all above their pay grade, or they can't decide, hey, I'm going to do this program tonight. They need funding. They need the support of the administration. So I wanted to make it very clear, because I felt like Commissioner Bocanegra and I have a very good relationship with the staff, and they were disheartened to hear that last meeting. And I want to make it very clear that our issues are not with your staff. We very much appreciate everything they do for our kids.
I'd like to reiterate that as well. We had a really great conversation with probation staff, institutional staff at the last visit, and I apologize to institutional staff, and I'll apologize again today. I think our disagreements in programming and things with management has caused them to feel like there's a black cloud over them.
Sorry. Sorry.
Okie bar for dinner. Yeah, they feel like there's a black cloud over them. And again, probation does an excellent job with these youth in there. They go above and beyond what's required of them. And I in no way or shape have ever meant for them to feel like we are discrediting the work that they're doing, right? Like they're doing the work in the institution, and they also see the youth outside of the institution and continue to have great reports with them. So our disagreements with management and programming and that, by no means do. Yes.
You must be saying a word, Paul, that gets that going.
And so again, our disagreements are just disagreements on programming. We all want the same thing. We are all trying to get to the same place. We're trying to get there maybe a little differently, but rest assured, I want probation and their institutional staff to know that I support them. I want to continue to work with the probation department, and I think they're doing an excellent job. So again, my hat goes off to the institutional staff and everything that they do, hands down. They don't even leave the institution for lunch. So
yeah, so we appreciate that.
Yeah, we appreciate them 100%.
All right, thank you, commissioners. I think maybe that's a good way to transition to section 4 of our agenda. At our last meeting, we voted to approve sending a letter to Chief Keen to invite him to come to our meeting in order to answer some questions or provide us with some information that we were otherwise unable to get. And I want to start off just by saying two things to the chief. One is, again, welcome. Thank you for your response and for coming to our meeting. One thing I wanted to clarify is when we say that there are some questions that we have been unable to get answers to in the meeting here. I just want to be clear that we really appreciate Ms. Clark and before Ms. Stoffer coming to all of our meetings and answering whatever questions they can. They're very helpful and provide us with a lot of useful information so that we can do our job, right, of inquiring into the administration of juvenile justice in the county. So there are just certain things that they may not know about or not be able to talk about, and so that's one of the reasons that we asked you to come as well. And the second thing I wanted to say before we got started is that it's our hope that we can have a regular dialogue with you and that you might keep coming to meetings because certainly there will be other questions we have as we go on and do our work. So we hope it's not a one-time appearance, and we hope that we have a productive dialogue today.
I'm sorry.
Just a couple more things. One is that when we do get to questions from the commissioners, my plan was to give every commissioner an opportunity to ask a question, and so we would just go around the room. But the second thing is I did want to say is before we get started on that, if there's something that you wanted to update us on, or if there's something that you wanted to say before we got started, I wanted to give you that chance. Now,
I appreciate that. Thank you. Can I just say a couple of words, if I might? And I again, Chief and I, we talk all the time just because I'm county attorney and Chief's being department head. And he sort of indicated that he had received this invitation. I thought, wow, great if you want to go and do this. The Chief definitely expressed an interest in coming to our willingness to come and talk to y'all. I was a little concerned just because as county attorney, my responsibility, of course, working with Peter and with Judith and others is to ensure that we're defending the county with respect to things that might be pending with respect to litigation and things like that. So it's possible there may be some constraints on some things that we're able to talk about depending on the kinds of questions that come in. So I just wanted to lay that framework out. It's not a desire to be less than forthcoming. It's just, again, we have a responsibility to the county to ensure that we're putting ourselves in the right places. We're trying to defend things that may be pending. So that's a matter I just wanted to lay out there, and I hope that you'll bear that in mind as you sort of think about the kinds of questions you might throw our way. So thank you, Chief.
Thank you. I appreciate it, John. Peter, you have anything?
No, I just, I guess just for the group's sake, I've been assigned supporting the probation department for, gosh, going on 6 years now. And to be honest, it's been the highlight of my career with my office is working with the department. So it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to work with the chief and his command staff.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So good evening. For those who may not know, and I've had the opportunity to meet directly, my name is John Keene. I'm the Chief Probation Officer here in San Mateo County. Since I was appointed by the courts in June of 2013 in concert with the board and the county exec's office. My work obligations are driven by current applicable federal and state laws and regulations that govern the work that I do. The job of the probation department and that of the chief is to act as an arm of the court. We are expected to be independent in our source of information to the courts. We do not work on behalf of the defense. We do not work on behalf of the prosecution. When I came on board, my professional goal in the juvenile justice space was and continues to be continual improvement in our role in the system, specifically areas that we are responsible for. We have no control over what youth are arrested, what charges are arrested for. We have very limited control over what youth remain detained once they go to court. Some are mandated by law to remain in our facility. We do not have sole responsibility over the youth as they continue to be detained or after their dispositional hearing in terms of what happens at the end of the court process. We make recommendations based on the information we have. And so therefore our independence is really important to the structure of what we do. In our facility, we work in collaboration with our system partners to provide services to our youth. We serve during their time of detention. Education services, as you heard earlier, healthcare, mental health, food services, drug and alcohol are just a few that are delivered by system partners other than probation. We are in constant communication with these partners, and the group is then sure that they can try to efficiently and effectively deliver services to our young people. However, the fluid nature of staffing has been challenging and has had impact on their processes. At no point, and I want to repeat this, at no point has there ever been an attempt to misrepresent what we provide or our focus on youth. Things happen throughout the year that makes the delivery of services change and reflect up and down based on the folks that we work with. So we try to work within those constraints and try to fill in as needed. But our focus in probation is to focus on the things that we have direct responsibility for and to work closely in collaboration with our partners along the way. I understand there are some specific questions that this body would like to ask. I also have opportunities to speak about our work and have talked to you in previous situations. Many of you I've worked with you in other commissions, I've met with you privately, and so I don't feel as if there is no sense of not knowing who I am and what I'm about. I also hope that there will be an opportunity for us to discuss some of the liberties that were taken by members of this commission and or guests within the community or other spaces with my personal and professional reputation as it relates to our department. Generally speaking, the slanderous and negative statements that have been made are disappointing and not in the spirit of collaboration or partnership. Additionally, actions of some of the commissioners have been disruptive within our facility and have has heightened the sense of tension and anxiety on behalf of our staff. I appreciate that here today. There was general comments to the fact that people respect our staff and appreciate what our staff do. However, in the actual real time of the work, it doesn't feel that way for them, for the employees. Our focus in probation is to ensure that we support our employees along the way. We try to provide them with all the resources they need to do their job effectively. Also, part of that is to support them in their ongoing mental and social health. Comments in public spaces also have characterized our department and its employees in a nature that has increased the level of mistrust between our probation department and members of this commission. Lastly, this behavior has spilled over into creating tension and emotional stress for some of the youth in our facility. I have examples of these concerns should the commission have interest in going into more detail. With that, I'm open to answer specific questions that you have. I know that there were conversations and comments with regard to us not providing programming that's required by state law. I do have the rubric that was passed out concerning some of the areas. I'm not sure if it would be instructive to go down it and address each one bullet point by bullet point, or if it's our intention to just randomly kind of field questions along the way, which may also hit some of the questions of things that we either are providing or not providing. And then lastly, before we do that, I want to just say that one of the greatest challenges of my career here as probation chief has been this constant struggle to find community-based organizations to come to our county. The reality is I have a tremendous interest in probation stepping out of spaces that we don't need to be a part of. People have heard me speak publicly. I've heard my stance on many of these issues around juvenile justice. I've been very supportive of reducing the reliance on detention from day one since I've got here. Secondly, I've been very open about my personal view that my hope is that every youth can be served in the juvenile courts, and that no youth will have to go to adult courts. I've been very clear about that. There's been no wavering on that at all. However, my organization, we have obligations that are laid out in the WIC in terms of what that process is in determining the fitness hearing that happens. We balance those 5 criteria and we provide information to the courts, but we do not individually ultimately decide what happens in that court process. We provide information so that the court may have a more thoughtful level of information to make, obviously, a very, very difficult decision. Lastly, when you think about programming, we are very confident that our record shows that every time we put out RFPs, we go above and beyond the process of trying to inform people, to solicit people within the space that we have, to try to get people to come to our environment. I wish that San Mateo County had such a robust community-based organization profile as a San Francisco, or as a Santa Clara, or as an LA, where frankly, it would be easy for probation to step out of many aspects of community-based supervision, which has always been my goal. My commitment in connection with FLY, for example, is an example of how we are working with them for the reentry aspect of what we did. I don't think probation officers should be a part of that. It bothers me that probation officers have to see kids in school. I don't like the distinction, and I don't like the stigma that's associated with young people being on probation in a school-based space. I think it also adds to poor performance, and it adds to youth dropping out of school. I'm aware of these things. I don't do this job in a bubble, and I have not ever come to this space with the intention of harming the youth that we serve. Part of what we try to do is we try to make sure that we employ good people, that we hold those people accountable if for some reason they step outside of that space, and we go all the way to the end of that environment to ensure that those employees don't have an opportunity to provide any further negativity or inappropriateness within the young people and adults that we serve. So we want more people, we want more community-based organizations, we want opportunities to allow others to do some of that work in the community. The reason why we have such low numbers, generally speaking, is that we've had a commitment in this county for a very long time, even before my time, of serving people in the natural community. It's the reason why we did not overutilize DJJ. Is also the reason why we have a very small amount of money that comes back to us from the state, because we were not overused the DJJ.
I appreciate that.
At the end of the day, our commitment stays the same, whether it's the secure track process or working with youth in a very general space. Our commitment is to ensure that our young people are able to stay here in their natural community. If that service in terms of the reentry model is done by probation officers, we're going to do our best to make that as least impactful in their maturation as we possibly can. Our hope is that people, much like FLY, will be able to step into those spaces and provide those services. So this is really this issue of programming and what we offer and what we don't offer, which I definitely have the ability to go into great detail about each one of these areas if necessary. The reality is that a lot of what happens is outside of the control of what we can manage. We cannot manage whether I'll take for example, AOD, which is something we all recognize is incredibly important. We know drug and alcohol support is incredibly important. But when Star Vista took over Pyramid, who was our provider in that space for many, many years and done an excellent job of it, when our numbers start to decrease, their business model couldn't sustain providing those services for us. So we've had to go outside of our normal process and try to find other folks to step in to provide that. We do our RFP process, which is a county-based space that we have no ability to alter or make different, do differently. The process is a very comprehensive space. It's a very transparent process. When we put out for that, for example, there were no takers. And so we've had to work within that to try to find other ways to provide that service. Our partners in behavioral health have stepped in where they can. You've heard that the schools, who are wonderful partners with us in so many variety of different spaces, have stepped in spaces as well. So it's just an example of this my hope is that there's this conversation around understanding kind of the nuts and bolts of how services are kind of obtained through a governmental process. I don't just go out and pick people that I like and say I want to do that. I don't, undercut these transparent processes. I take very seriously my fiscal and financial duty to the citizens of this county. And so we try to do our best to make very thoughtful decisions about how we spend the taxpayers' funds and where that money is spent. And we do that in a transparent manner. We go in front of the board, we take contracts to the board to do things. The board's aware of what we do and what we don't do. So, like I said, depending upon how we want to address the concerns in that space, we can definitely move. And then certainly also know that there's some interest around the secure track recommendations and what that looks like. Some members of my team will be heading to Santa Clara in a couple of weeks with the judge and with Mr. Reyes to go tour that space there to see what's available in that environment. But we're always going to have to balance what can be created in our space. We can see something in another environment and say that sounds wonderful, but we still have to find a way to bring those services here. We still have to find therapists that will come and do the work. Right. So like I said, there's a variety of things that play into this, but one thing I can assure you of is that it's not that we are evil people with evil intent and have no desire to work with kids or hurt kids or do some of the things that frankly have been suggested, which are extremely disappointing. So.
Well, I will say, thank you, Chief Keenan, and I will say that I firmly believe that this commission, as a commission, does not believe that, there's evil people in the probation department that are doing evil things with kids. That I firmly believe that is the position of the commission as a whole, and we appreciate the work that it's done. There are a lot of questions, I think, that we had about programs and programming, and I'm gonna pass it on to other commissioners to be able to speak, right, or to ask questions. I wanted to set this up in a way that each commissioner would have an opportunity to ask questions, so we could get even participation. So I'll still do that. I know that once we get around the room, that there were some commissioners who had specific questions about programming or secure track. I guess I'll just start by repeating something that I said at the last Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council meeting with regard to programming, which is that I find it's ironic that this county has done such a good job of reducing the numbers of youth in detention, and then that puts us in the position sometimes of not being able to get funding because we don't have numbers to attract, CBOs or funding, right? And so a fundamental question that I have is there some way to provide a minimal amount of funding from the county, regardless of how many kids are there, or to restructure contracts in such a way that it's not dependent on the numbers of kids served, but that there's always a minimal amount of funding so that an AOD therapist is always available?
Both of those are great questions. Let me take the latter first. I think that we have done that. We've actually restructured our contract several times since COVID to try to continue to have services provided, whether it was in a virtual space or to be, a per fee delivery of contracts versus this larger number that oftentimes contracts in our space are like. So we've done that on a couple of occasions, and we're always open to that environment. As a point of clarity, I would say money's not the issue. We've never said money was the issue, not one time. Have we ever said we don't have money for things? What we've tried to continually emphasize when asked the question is that the reality is we still don't have programs who are willing to come and do the work in our county. That's the issue. It's not about money. We have done a great job in this county of being fiscally responsible. And so we understand what is necessary and how to do that. For example, as we said earlier, I picked AOD or I picked mental health because mental health is also a huge lightning rod for this concern. So we all recognize the importance of having good therapists for our young people. But money is not the reason why we don't have the therapist trainees that we used to have 50 or 60 of that will come and work with our kids. Money's not the reason for why behavioral health is not able to get and retain these therapists. It is a reality that everyone is struggling across the state to employ therapists. The reality is that you're absolutely right. You said earlier, the fact that we've done a great job, we've been committed to potential reform since I got here. We've reduced our numbers even before COVID. We've limited the number of youth and the types of youth that we detain in our system. We put more youth out on EMP before we were required to do so. And those numbers went down. And so the reality is that the horrible irony is that now that the numbers are low, it's difficult for business models to come in and say, I'm going to provide a service for 3 kids when you can provide that service prior when it was 30 kids or 40 kids or 60 kids. That's the real issue. So I just want to be clear that it's not us saying that we can't spend the money, or we don't spend the money, or we don't have access to money. We can write grants, for example, to go deeper into the solicitation of funds to get additional money. But the reality is, if I write a grant, the likelihood that I'm going to get a grant when I have a population of 10 versus other people that I'm going to compete with that have populations of 700, that frankly, from a data perspective, will provide statistically, more, significant information. Right. They're going to win every single time. And I know that because I've been writing grants, managing grants for over a decade. So it's not about not wanting to do certain things. So
thank you, John, for closing those. I was thinking we didn't intend to have you in the spot.
I thought that was all.
All right, I wanted to stop talking and make sure commissioners have a chance to ask a question and pass. So I'm going to pass it around. And Commissioner Swope, you're first.
You're dealing with a lot of change from the state as well as the limitations that you have in terms of resources within the county. And I was wondering if you could give us an update on how you're using the state funds for softening juvenile law. How's that coming along?
You're absolutely right, Commissioner. I'll say again for the 1000th time, I believe, is that I was not, nor was any of my peers, in support of this transition from the state to the counties. We had no desire for this because we knew that it was going to be very difficult to manage. And then frankly, the appropriate systems and foundations that need to be in place were going to require years to build properly to support young people in a fashion that's very similar to what DJJ has done through decades of experience, decades of litigation, and decades and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment into that system, something that wasn't done for counties. So counties are being asked to do the exact same work on a shoestring budget with no future consideration whatsoever. And I think it's a unfortunate example of the state punting its responsibilities to the counties on a variety of levels. The money that we did receive from them, we have been working feverishly on a lot of the changes in the softening project. I know we're going to all jointly go to the board in a couple of weeks to talk about some of those things. We have focused really intently when listening to the things that this commission put in their report about recommendations that it felt were appropriate at its base. And so for the most part, I think we captured pretty much most, if not all, of what this commission asked for to try to focus on. But once again, I have to, condition everything is the perspective that, as a county, we have to purchase things a certain way. I can't go down to Best Buy and just buy music equipment. I have to go through the process, I have to go through the bidding process, and then that takes time. And so we are very happy that there are elements of the plan that are already targeted for completion very soon, whether it's the music room, the enhanced fitness space, the rec room, the music studio that's going to be in space. We had guitar lessons recently that were the first kind of precursor to some of those things. We're working very closely with county procurement on the purchasing of tablets to enhance education opportunities within the facility. I know we may have an opportunity to talk about the culinary arts and vocational programming. We've been able to reignite and reconnect with our Patterson folks that were providing vocational training out in the camp. And then so we're working with them to build something that's appropriate for the size of the facility. And so we, a lot of things we're working on in terms of just not only just softening of the spaces, adding plants, adding greenery, changing some of the things that this commission noted that was important for young people in general. Some of the kind of harder things that folks want to see, and we're working on. It's important though also too for the softening project to just be very clear that there are a lot of things in terms of changing elements of the room, changing elements of the beds, things like that, that I can't do in a bubble. I have to work closely with BSCC to ensure that we will pass inspection when we do certain things. There are also certain things that from the staff perspective that we have to make sure that we provide proper training around supports of that. The honest to goodness truth is that yes, providing bins for capturing the personal effects is a great idea, but also now that changes the way in which we have to to inspect those spaces to ensure that parts of the ban are not missing. There are other things that could be potentially dangerous within the facility we have to account for. So there's a large variety of things that are happening. We look forward to when we go in front of the board to hope that more of this has been actually concretely done. But we do have all of the processes to show that we're working closely with people and have done our bids and done everything we need to do. So we're confident that these things are moving along.
I just want to clarify that the going before the board is currently scheduled for June because of some conflicts that we had. So yeah, not a couple of weeks, more like a couple of months. But yeah,
like in my mind,
hopefully more will be done.
Yeah, we'll be there.
Commissioner Amandori.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you are aware, but PurePoint, which was the restorative justice diversionary program that we started and was adopted by FLY, had updated their model rather than focusing on the county as a whole. We've zoomed into specific schools, such as Menlo Atherton. Do you have any further thought on the program now compared to where it was before?
I do. I appreciate the question. So as maybe some of you may be aware, the restorative justice model is something I was very familiar with when I came here. I was part of the foundation of people who created this in Alameda County for what we're doing. One of the first things I had a chance to do when I came on board was to travel to Washington, D.C. with the police chief, several commissioners, and other folks from several school superintendents to look at not only restorative justice models, but look at diversion models. What was talked about then, we attempted to do it in my time in Alameda, was initially people said, hey, restorative justice programs can be inside of juvenile halls. And so many of us made attempts to do that. We did the same in Alameda County. And it was not as much emphasis on the school-based setting, which really was important. We found that out for research later on. And so there was not a concerted effort not to do things in the hall because we didn't want to, but because the science at the time suggested that we should, that it was not the proper environment for it. We have to be a program, to be the Victims Impact program that runs through our assessment center. But as far as a full-blown sort of justice model, we just did not do it initially. But to see the transition into the school space things, I think it really does speak to hopefully a growth in restorative justice models in a way that I do think they can be placed inside of institutions today, where potentially it couldn't in the past, whether it is through our schools, which frankly, as I said before, have been wonderful incubators for a lot of new ideas that we've been able to do. Our focus on working with you, for example, at educational deficits and the transition to the second classroom. That was all made possible because we had a really good working relationship with the schools and UFLOM to try to do something innovative without being forced to do so. So the short answer to your question is I'm aware of it, I'm interested in it. When we look at the potential for with the secure track youth, I think it's great potential there for them, considering how long potentially they could be with us. And I say potentially because I know we see the 7-year, 8-year potential mark for individuals to youth to be with us. But there's also the opportunity for every 6 months when that young person goes in front of the bench to potentially have that time either cut or potentially even to be transitioned into a less secure space. So we're not sure what that will look like. And even as we build out, we're only looking at maybe less than 5 kids over the next 5 years. So young people, young adults. So a lot of information there to say that yes, I'm familiar with it. I think it's great. And I think that opportunity now for it to be present in our space is more applicable than it was in the past.
Thank you.
Okay, continuing to go around, I know we have a few commissioners who are on Zoom. And so the Zoom screen is up next. And I think Commissioner Huber-Levy, you had a question, so I'll call on you first on Zoom.
Thank you, and good evening, Chief Keen. I'm really happy that you have made the time and effort to come and join us at the meeting. And I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I'm actually visiting my parents in Ohio right now, and sorry to miss this meeting, because I think it is extremely valuable for all of us to have this opportunity to build hopefully what is an ongoing dialogue and contribute to a productive working relationship for all of us. Because I do think that we have the same goals for the youth in our county. One of my questions is about some research that I've been doing. The commission tasked me with interacting with other juvenile justice commissions in our state and just opening up a dialogue with them and learning from them. And one of the topics that I was discussing with the Sacramento Juvenile Justice Commission concerned their brand new use of body scanning equipment in their youth detention center to replace what is, I guess, experienced as potentially traumatic strip searches for youth who may have had other experiences in their life that are aggravated by ongoing strip searches. And I'm just wondering if that is something that you see could potentially be adopted in our county, the use of body scanning technology to replace strip searches.
You know, I will tell you that I have not had the opportunity to research that for application here. I'm familiar with it. Chief Yarbo has done some informational discussions with myself and other chiefs across the state regarding transition to that program. It's something that, quite frankly, it feels like there's a great potential for us to use it here. But personally, I don't know enough about it to say today that, yes, this is something we would transition to. I would say that probably the best thing I can offer today is that I'm certainly up for any type of improvements that could be made within the facility. I recognize that all of our youth have experienced trauma and their experiences. We all are the sum total of our life experiences. And so we bring that with us. We as staff bring our own trauma to this work. None of us come to this work clean, unfortunately. So if there's things that we can do alternately to minimize that, I'm certainly in favor of that. So.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. And I know it's a very new program that has been introduced in Sacramento as well. And the comment from the commissioner that I spoke to is it may be too soon to completely judge its success and efficacy. But, you know, I thought it was very exciting that I'd seen that this has been something that had been adopted by adult detention facilities, but the Sacramento example was the only youth detention center that I had seen use it. So I'm really enthused and delighted that you're paying attention to it and considering it in terms of how it might assist our youth in our county. So thank you.
So one of the last thing I'll say is one of the interesting things about new technology is I will tell you my inbox is flooded daily by institutional technology and updates that come from across the nation. And so I had a chance to read about it before I actually even heard anyone actually doing it. So I think it's a natural transition when you look at the introduction of biometrics into a variety of spaces within inside the facility to reduce physical interactions where possible. So I think it's just, once again, just something that is coming down the pipe. So it'll be interesting to see how, once they have their inspection, how the VSCC will interact with that new technology and its relation to the Title 12 and Title 24.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Huber-Levy. And I know that Commissioner Sotvic-Nori is also.
I don't think he's here anymore.
Is he still there?
Alan?
Alan is here. So.
Okay. Commissioner Sotvic-Nori, I guess he had to drop off.
Yeah.
He's I don't know if you all are aware, but he was selected to the to be a trustee of the Sequoia Union
high school district, the youngest person ever elected.
So maybe you had a conflicting meeting.
Actually, I spoke to him before the meeting started, and he's in Washington, D.C. advocating on behalf of some current issues for youth. So he's on the same time zone that I'm on.
Okay, great. Commissioner Bustos, you're on the Zoom. Did you have a question for Chief Keen? Is Commissioner Bustos still there?
Oh, I don't think he's here.
I don't see him. I don't think he's on this one. He was earlier.
Okay, I think if Commissioner Bustos does come back, he can let us know. So that comes to you, Commissioner Rasmussen.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Chief, and thank you for bringing all of your people with you. Appreciate that. I wanted to make a comment before I ask the question. I really looked through the RFP process because Commissioner Bocanegra and I were really out soliciting people like, please put it in RFP. And what the feedback that we got was that it really wasn't an equitable process. And I understand it's not your process, it's the county process. So I say that mostly for you, John, like maybe that's something to look at, that we need to remove some obstacles so we can get more people to respond to those, because people were interested, but they said, we don't have the capacity to put all this together in this amount of time.
Well, your comment is timely. The Board of Supervisors even today retained through an RFP process, actually an individual outfit to take a look at our RFP process through an equity lens. And so it'll be interesting. It seems like the kind of thing you probably want to make sure that your observations get incorporated into that effort. So feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email or something about anything specific. Maybe I can put you in touch with people who are involved in that process.
So my question has to do with the budget. We've been trying to get the budget. Maybe the chief can explain like how budgets work. We've been trying to figure out how to get our hands on the budget so we can look at how much do things cost? How much does staff cost? When we talk to staff, they tell us that they don't have the resources they need, and they don't have adequate staffing in the facility. Whenever they say that there is something lacking, they've even asked Commissioner Bocanegra and I, can you go to the community and get this for us? And we can, it's easy. We've got a bunch of supporters. We live in Silicon Valley. There's a lot of money here. So there's a way to patch these holes, and we want to partner with you. So it's very disheartening to hear that you might think that we think you're evil or that this is personal. This is about the kids, and we want to partner with you. And we can't get the work done without you. And we'd like that feeling to be mutual. And so maybe you can explain how the budget process works, how we might be able to get that, so then we can look at how we can best serve the youth and be a partner to you.
So respectfully, I think it's difficult to go to staff and ask them why something's happening a certain way. The reason why my team is here with me today, my management team, is that at the end of the day, we're committed to making sure that we do things in a manner that's transparent, where we can share information. The request for information have been submitted to us. Mr. Cruz is here because he and our custodian of records take the request for information very, very seriously. We spend a tremendous amount of time ensuring that we are providing as best we can the information that's being requested that we can understand in terms of what's being requested. I respectfully would ask that if there are concerns about what we spend money on or how we do things, that you not ask our staff. That's questions they can't answer. That's not within the scope of their jobs. So when you have questions around staffing levels, which frankly has been a question within the space for quite a while, even at the board, and maybe you recall when we first started talking about the hall and whether frankly it should continue to exist or not, a lot of the questions that were around was the cost of the facility. So we spent a very long time talking about staffing levels and things of that nature. Staffing levels are not driven by the department, they're driven by the state. The state will say exactly how many staff you can theoretically have in relation to you. Staff in our facility and staff within the organization have for a long time had a set number of staff in their mind that they believe is necessary to function and do the work. I respect that. I respect their position that they come from and their commentary. However, when it's all said and done, as the administrator of the facility, the administrator of the entire department, I have to look at the totality of what we do in terms of kind of what is reasonable. So for me to stand in front of the dais and say, I have 22 kids, and to say we have 75 employees at various times inside the facility, we recognize that fits within the spectrum of what is going on in terms of our ratio. We know that at the BSCC for example, they are debating as to whether to increase the ratio because they want to include some additional standards that many people believe will add safety to the space. And so the reality is that when you think about the budget is something where we work collaboratively with the county. There is two parts to most of our budgets in relation to how we get money. The money comes from either the state, where they actually allocate funds for us to do certain activities. Those activities are usually hardwired in terms of what that money gets spent on. Then there's also the general fund money that comes from the board. Salary and benefits will always be the primary source of what we spend our money on as an organization. That's just the reality of what it costs to employ people, to pay their benefits, to provide all the additional resources towards healthcare and everything else. That's the lion's share of what we do. In terms of saying what something costs, that kind of line item, we paid this much for a chair or that much for a table. That information generally is not found in public spaces. If there, for some reason there's a request to know, for example, when we put our RFP out to provide a certain, whatever it is, whether it's new furniture or the money we're going to spend, for example, with regard to the sound room, the engineering space. Certainly we can share that information with you. There's no question about what's what. But I would just say respectfully that our staff are not really a resource, in my opinion, for administrative decision making. They're not.
Exactly.
They're not. And so, well, frankly, I'm not quite sure why you're asking them about
They
things
bring it
that
to us. So I think there's a misunderstanding.
Well, I think
they bring it to us.
Well, I hear you say that, ma'am, but at the same time, too, when we hear from our staff, we feel what we're hearing is that it's the opposite way around. What we're hearing is that they feel put upon, pressed upon, intimidated, and they feel tension when oftentimes they're being asked questions that they feel are not in their space to answer. When they're being asked about pending litigation, what you think about this, or what do you think about that? That's not the job they signed up for. It's not. And so when it's all said and done, you may disagree in how, I'm representing it to you today, but this team has a responsibility to the people who work for us. And they come to us and tell us this. And you may have a person who may say one thing to you and say something else to us. But the reality is, I'm not here to suggest you're being dishonest or suggest whatever. All we know is what we hear. All we know is what we have to manage when it comes to that space. So when our employees are saying, man, it feels like I'm just being put upon. Every time they, certain people come into the facility, it's like, what are you doing? What are you not doing? Why don't you have this? Why don't you have that? That's the response that we're getting. That's what we're hearing. And so I know that you all have built relationships with certain staff, but when it's all said and done, if there are questions about what we're not doing, what we're not spending money on, if we're spending money on something you feel that is inappropriate, myself or Assistant Chief McCaskill are the people who should field those types of questions.
For the record, I want to make sure that you're aware that I never asked your staff a question about pending litigation.
Well, all I can say, ma'am, is that what you're telling me now is inconsistent with what we've been told. That's all I can say. And it's like I said, it's not to be combative with you. It's not to try to suggest anything about who you are as an individual. Because you know what? It's not comfortable to have somebody say those types of things. I was very disheartened when I heard the things that were said in this space last time. I was very disheartened when I heard from community members in community spaces where members of this commission have showed up and said very inflammatory things about the work that we do. Those things don't feel good. It doesn't. And so I understand how you feel right now. But I know that when we get together and we work with our staff, I know what we're being told. And so this could be an example of people saying two things to us to put whatever the case may be. It could be one person's impression because they have other things that they want to try to put upon. I will tell you, the role of an administrator in an organization is not fun because you're not going to make everyone happy. When you purchase things or you don't do things, or you don't fill positions that people think should be filled, those things don't always sit well with people. But I am confident based on my 25 years of experience that we make decisions that are in the best interest of not only the organization and the kids we serve, but our fiduciary responsibility to the board and to the people of this county. that's a space that I have to balance out in everything that I do. So we will always hear the suggestions that you make, and this commission makes for things that we can make improvements in. But please don't misinterpret my need to analyze, my need to consider, my need to frankly carry the burden that comes with this job as somehow some affront to what it is that we want to accomplish. That's not it. When I say we have divergent interests,
yes,
this is exactly the things I'm talking about. When we get together and we're on different paths, when I'm hearing things and my staff are saying things to us that don't sound like this is a collaborative connection, that's what it meant to be divergent, that we're on different paths. It wasn't a negative statement about you all personally, but what it was that if the goal of some of these questions and some of this engagement is to destroy the system as it exists, or to change the system as it exists, to do things that quite frankly are not consistent with our roles, then that's not a path that we're on. But if the path intention is for us to work to try to make improvements to the system in a way that is collaborative and not accusatory, then we're on the same path here. And frankly, when I started here in 2013, there are people in this commission that I had outstanding working relationship with. We connected, we talked, they asked hard questions, and we made hard decisions. But it never got to the point where it felt like there was some type of, interpersonal rift that was more targeted.
I'm sorry you feel that it's personal. I'm relatively new here.
Well, like I said, man, I don't want to waste this board's time, this commission's time going into specifics of unless those things are necessary. But I think that there's just some not alignment in what's being said here today versus what's been said in other spaces. It's not. So I didn't mean to disrupt your question, but the budget itself that's what we do. We have the money that comes to us from the state. We have the money that the county gives us in the general fund. That money goes together. We spend that on the services that are mandated that we have to provide, particularly in the juvenile space. That's where most of the services are quote unquote mandated by either the WIC or by the penal code. And then so there's financial money that comes with that at the state. For example, the money we spend in the JJCPA, things of that nature that happens at the JJCC meetings. That money is designated for that space. And that's the reason why we put out millions of dollars every year in preventative space, because that's really what the goal was for that environment. So we put money out, and I hear you when you said that there's a feeling that there are parts of the RFP process that may not be as fair-minded. And that's not a new call. And so I was really happy today to see the board that's going to take a more in-depth look at that, because I know they care about equity in terms of how the services are delivered. So I'm excited to see that part happen. But if there's specifics about what we're spending our money on and what we're not spending our money on, I welcome those questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chief King and your staff. It's a pleasure to have everyone here today. Normally, Ms. Clark is here solo, and I know we make you feel uncomfortable at times, Ms. Clark, but thank you for always handling the questions as well as you do. And Chief King, to you, thank you for all you've done in your 11 years that you've been here. So my question is, you and I sit on the Reimagining Juvenile Hall, and we know that there's been statements that there's no money to soften this prison-like environment that we've created here with the $156 million. And some of the statements that you've made today are alarming, Chief, like the process that it takes, governmental process that it takes to systemically change maybe an institution or environment, and the length and the steps. And so we have youth that have been sentenced that will be in this prison-like environment for 10 years. 10 years. We have youth, and they're primarily youth of color, that are going to be spending this length of time in this prison-like environment. And the fact that we're speaking of the length of time it's going to take to make amendments that the state dropped on the county, right? Is alarming to me, because we have youth right now that have been there 2 years. They could have had a welding degree already, certification. They could have been certified in 2 things. And this is something DJJ has supplied and have been a model for different counties across the state. So what the changes that we're seeking today, they're not extraordinary. These are things that are common in our neighbor, within our neighbor, our region here in Silicon Valley. And they're not coming here yet. They're not coming here yet. And when I hear the fact that, and you and I are working together as well as Monroe on Reimagine, that it's going to take time, but that these youth will have to spend this amount of time in this prison-like environment with no step down. Right now, today in San Mateo County, there's no step down. This means in CDCR, we have maximum security, Pelican Bay. You have level 4 maximum security, 270. You have level 3. You have level 2, where I transitioned out of. I came from maximum security, Pelican Bay, where we had pillows, cups, TVs in there, certain stimulation that these youth didn't have when I came home, that they're starting to receive now. It just worries me that it's going to take this governmental process to create what is needed today. We've already sentenced kids to secure track today. They've been doing time already there, and they haven't been able to become certified in nothing. And today, when I hear this governmental process, I'm thinking, oh my God, what is it going to take to soften this environment? What is it going to take for us to catch up to what's already being modeled all around us? So my question is, step down. I came through a step down. It is very understood in the state that a step down model is needed to decompress any human being who's suffering long-term incarceration. We don't have that here in San Mateo County. And the governmental process that you're describing right now is pretty scary to me, knowing that we've had kids in there years and they haven't accomplished nothing because of the process. No certifications. Do we have a certification in there right now of a trade? No, we don't. If there is a graduate of one, I'd like to know who the person is. But what is it going to take to soften this prison-like environment? What is it going to take to get boys to camp so that they can enjoy the same privileges that girls do? Reverse discrimination is happening. If you're a boy, you get the prison-like environment, that's where you go home from. If you're a girl, you get the camp-like environment, that's where you go home from. I have spoken with community leaders, and if the roles were reversed, there'd be a lot of people out of a job, I heard. So that's my question to you. Step down. This is something that is not new to you, Chief, coming from me. What do you think the process is going to be? The time, the money that we don't have, that you clearly say we don't have the money, the state. This is the state's problem that they put on us. But the county is incarcerating these kids. The county is sentencing these kids. The county is expecting rehabilitation from these kids. How long is it going to take? That's all I got to say. We got kids in 10 years. And thank you, Chief.
I mean, it's a lot there, you know, Mr. Bogner. I mean, you made a lot of comments that, frankly, I'm not quite sure how I'll speak to that, to be honest with you. You and I have had engagement back and forth about this.
Yes.
You know, the reality is that I understand the stressor. I understand the challenges of wanting something that looks like other systems should look. I also understand that there's a consideration of what is happening in other counties around us. I understand that and I respect those positions. But the reality is that while certainly this idea of fair treatment for boys in this conversation, let's not forget where Kemp came from. There was a push in the 80s and 90s for gender responsive care for girls. So let's not wash over that to say that it's somehow less than important, or somehow this idea that boys need it now is somehow coming deficit of the girls or the deficit of the boys for that matter, this general conversation. The reality is we don't know what the future of camp's going to be. The number of girls in our population has always been minimal, it's been small, and that's a good thing. The intergenerational reality of when girls are in detention is much harsher for a family than it is for boys. And so this county has shown a commitment to working with girls in a very different, unique way. So much so that the model was, for many years, the model in the United States. When I came here, people came to visit from all over the country to see the work that we were doing with girls, because they understand and recognize the importance of breaking the intergenerational cycle when girls become mothers and what that does for a family. With that said, I will say that the idea of a step down is not something that I'm opposed to. I'm just not quite sure where is it going to be built. That's the reality. It's very difficult, and I know you all talk to the board members, and the board members, frankly, can talk ad nauseum about the difficulties of building anything new in our county and the challenges of working with the citizens to build something new in a particular space. That said, if it is the desire of the county to close camp or to transition camp into some type of step down, then we will work hand in hand to make that happen. We will. There's no disagreement that step downs are important. The challenge, though, is that when you build a program out again for what will still be a very small number of youth, you're going to recreate the same program, the same problem that you have again. Best models, in my personal professional opinion, does not have probation involved in it. That's the best model. So if, once again, if in your advocacy, you want to speak with the court, you want to speak to the board about some other use for camp that potentially has a step down model to it, once again, you heard it here today, and I'll repeat it in any other public space you want me to. I'm in support of that. However, probation should not be the group that runs that facility. We should not. It's not consistent with what we train juvenile hall employees to do. It's not what I think the proper environment for that transition to take place, and it should not include our staff along the way. The bigger issues around camp are not just the numbers of how many youth are in there, and then that will impact what it can be transitioned into. I think you've heard on many occasions the board say that there's a debt service associated with that facility. There's still debt that is owed for that facility. The money that was utilized, and I know my colleague here, Mr. Niblin, and others in his office have looked for over many years, over the past decade, for how to answer that question of how do you utilize bonds that were, got for a very specific reason. And that when you look at even your questions about softening the hall, a lot of that is not just about my decision to say, you know what, these walls all need to come down. There was a specific type of funding that was associated with the building of that hall that dictates what the building can be. It dictates how the building looks, what the corners look like, what the ADA looks like. That's not a decision that I can make. And frankly, until the law changes, it's not really a safe decision that the board can make. Those are things that are beyond what we do here at the local level. Now, the board can make a decision, and to say something has to happen, we'll all figure out how to make it happen. But this is not about us just being barriers to things. There's a reason why and how these things were built, and then how they have to be managed. Many of you have heard in the past, I've talked about we looked at transitioning camp into then a kind of step down group home space back when group homes were so allowable. We did this back in 2015, 2016. At that time, we brought in the state, was community care licensing at the time, to look at the space to determine what it would take to make that facility usable for something other than detention. First thing we learned is that that 30-bed facility would shrink down to a 6-bed facility under new regulations. And then the monies associated with knocking down walls, opening up spaces to make it softer, to make it more home-like, was in the millions of dollars. So the reality is that while I respect that you're saying that, it's the county's responsibility because the county is the one who's deploying these youth into these facilities, what was built in DJJ didn't happen overnight. We're talking about decades of programming modification, decades of litigation, decades of hundreds of millions of dollars to invest in the program to build it what it turned into be. That's why it was depressing, frankly, to see it close down when it finally got to what it should have been all along. So with all that said, I hate to break it down to this kind of like zero-sum game, but to build what CDC had, to build what DJJ was, we're not going to get that done in a year, a 2-year process. And I recognize that along the way, it's going to be challenges that we can, we feel like we can offset in some arenas by how we bring programming in to support the young people that are our responsibility to support. But we need help. We need other things to do that. And maybe this evaluation of the RP will change that process, and we'll look up next year, we won't be having this conversation because we'll have a flood of people coming in to provide services in an effective manner. Trust me, I want out of the business. I want out of the business of being in that space to be a hindrance to young people feeling like they can connect back to their communities. I've heard the comments, I've heard the concern, and I share those concerns. So if we can step out of reentry where it's appropriate, we want to do that. But it's irresponsible for us to do that, but there's no one to take the place. And it's no one to do that in a manner that is going to be consistent with what the court expects. So I don't have a full answer for you. I can't tell you when. I can't tell you what it's going to take. All I can tell you is that there are barriers that are extensive to get to that model that you talked about very eloquently in various spaces. You talked about your experience. You talked about the concern of that transition and what it should look like. And as I told you, you get no disagreement from me about those the generality of those things. You and I disagree about cages. Yes. We disagree about some of the more general statements that that you make about the use of detention in general. But what you and I don't disagree on is that we have a responsibility to try to rehabilitate and habilitate when necessary the young people that are in our service.
Thank you so much for coming. I was the commissioner that initiated asking you to come, and it would be my hope that you would come with some routine frequency, because I'm now the second oldest commissioner, and I actually don't feel like I know you at all. And this is the first time I'm hearing some ideas from you that have been really heartening to me. Another thing that I proposed when I asked us to send the letter was also have a restorative conversation with you, because I think there are a lot of hurt feelings, and I would attribute it to a lot of non-communication rather than miscommunication, non-communication. We're not hearing directly from you, and you're not hearing directly from us. It looks like you disagree, but there's a possibility that that's the case. So I'd like you to consider that. I won't ask you to commit to that right now, but I'd like you to consider that, because I think there's a lot to unpack. And what I would like to present us as, we have these fierce warriors, right? And we want to work for you. So let us find those CBOs. Come to meetings and give us a task. Like, we just want to be useful, and we want what's best for the kids, and you want what's best for the kids, and we could come together and be synergistic and deliver things to you. Recently, there was a community group that came in and offered Jehan and Melanie research towards vocational programs, looking at what other facilities were doing, coming up with ideas. And when they got to someone in the administrative staff, the person said, "We don't need your help." And I think that was a missed opportunity. I don't know if that came from you or whether that was an individual making a decision that there wasn't bandwidth for that. But there are CBOs out there, and we would love to be strengthening your department and strengthening what you do. And because, what a great vision. If we could all be working towards the same goals, that would be great. I think that we feel shut out, and that there's an inscrutable system that's making decisions without explanation and without dialogue. It would really help me if there was just more dialogue, so that I understood the reality. So my question I was going to ask, and I think you've answered it, is when a CBO drops out, and so the program's no longer in place, what can be done to find a replacement. And what I heard from you today was that basically the RFP process has your hands tied. And so if you lose the drug and alcohol educator, they're gone for 3 months. I don't know how long the RFP process is, but they're gone for some period of time until you can get that back. Well, if that's the case, I can accept that, right? That's a constraint you're living in, I'm living in. But I need to know that stuff, because otherwise I just walk around pissed off about why kids aren't getting alcohol and substance abuse supports. So that's, I mean, I could ask you other questions, but I would hope that you might be open to a conversation. I would really value it, because I've been in the space for 5 years. I've been in your facility for 20 years, and I don't have any insight. And I think I should. Like, I think I'm part of the system, and this is a public agency, and there's public reporting and transparency, and it feels like I should kind of know more about the mindset and the perspectives and how decisions are being made. And you know, when we did our inspection report and we asked your department to provide a response within 45 days and no response came, that sucks. I'd like to know why. Why do we not deserve? We put a lot of work into our piece we present you with. You say you listen to us. Why don't we deserve a response? So I guess that's my question. Why not respond to an inspection report?
Traditionally, that's not what we have done. We've received your report and we've not been asked to respond back. What we have done in the 10 years I've been here is be responsive to the recommendations. If there's things that need to be done, we respond to that. When we work in concert in other spaces, we have ongoing communication. Commissioners from this group over the years have come and met with me to ask me specific questions. There's no barrier to talking to me. The fact that you say you don't know me is, I think, also informative in terms of some of the questions, because I have been very open about who I am and what I believe in. I talk publicly all over the place about what we do and what we're trying to do. So the fact is, you are free to ask us any questions about what we do and how we do it. And I'm going to be responsive to those things. If there is a new expectation from this commission of how we will engage with you in the future, then we'll do that. That has not been the way things have been done in the past. So if there's a new request, I will sit down with the presiding juvenile judge and we'll talk about how best to respond to that space. So there was no intent to like thumb our nose at you or something to say we don't want to respond. I mean, because if that's the case, I think it would have been reflective in how we took the recommendations in the first place. As far as working with us to bring people in, frankly, when I look at the code in terms of what this commission is tasked to do, there's nothing, frankly, I have no responsibility to this commission in terms of telling you what to do or suggesting how to do your business. You're free to bring people in, you're free to make suggestions to us, but I'm also free and responsible in my position to evaluate those suggestions and to determine based on what is there that can be done. Because I have the answer for that. No matter how much you want to run beside me and be an ally, you're not going to stand next to me when my job's on the line for doing things. You're not going to be the one responsible for if something happens that's unfortunate. That's going to be on me. So I would appreciate there being some understanding that I'm only doing what my job requires me to do, which is to administer the functions of this organization, to take into account hundreds of things that you will know nothing about, to deal with personnel issues that, frankly, is not the preview of this board, of this commission, that I have to manage. All these things, labor concerns, all these things that all go into this job that are my responsibility. And so I'm willing to hear from you. I'm willing to take in the concerns you have. I'm willing when you send something and say, hey, Chief, this is a good thing. But if I say to you as a commission, not to you specifically, but if I say to you as a commission, you know what, we looked at that, we evaluated it, and frankly, we don't think that it fits what we're trying to do, or we don't have the manpower for it, or the bandwidth for it. That's done out of a realization that we are professionals in this space, and we're not just making it up. We're not just winging it or anything of that nature. So we're going to, you know, hopefully have the space and time where we can evaluate things, and it doesn't put us at odds with them. If we say thank you, we appreciate that, but that specifically doesn't work for what we're trying to do. It's not an affront to the relationship. It's not an affront to what it is you're trying to suggest for us. I don't recall. I have no knowledge of some.
I don't think you do.
I have no knowledge of a situation where there was some program that you put forth and whatever. It doesn't make sense.
I didn't sense that you. The question was, did you know about it? I didn't know. I didn't feel like you knew about it, but.
Anyone who communicates with me knows that I'm responsible. You ask me a question, I respond back to you. I've been out for the last several months, but many of you have emailed and asked questions and things of that nature. And I've made it my business to be responsive because I know this work is important. And I know the reality of what we're trying to do is we're trying to move in the same space. So there's nothing about what I'm here to do that gets in the way of anything this commission wants to do in the area of moving suggestions forward, sending, you know, people our way to say, hey, this program here could be this, that program could be that. We're open to all of that.
And so how best to dialogue? Like just send an email directly to you?
If there's something that you feel that is relevant to the programming in our space or something you would like for us to consider, I think I have proven myself to be responsive when people email me. No one can tell you what I think about those things better than me. So if you ask me, when Jahan and my staff have come, they've come because that's how I've chosen to staff this commission. I have talked to my peers across the state. As a president of my association, I have access to all 59 of the chiefs in the state. And so when I talk with them about what they do, I'm able to find out firsthand. And I know that the way in which we have staffed this commission is not inconsistent with the way many other departments do the same work. And so I know that when there's communication gaps, when you get down to, you know, things like this where concerns are being had to say that we're not providing services or programs that are dictated by law, you can respond to that. Matter of fact, I appreciate this. I'm a very formal person. So when you send me something that says, Chief, these things are not being done in your space. If you feel that a person, for example, is not getting education, my first hope would be that that would be a real-time conversation, not a conversation that happens a month later or several weeks later. I would hope that that would be the way we would communicate, because that's the way we've communicated in the past. So if there's situations where those things exist, then we're willing to respond to those things. And so, hey, what about this, that, and the other? Then I would give you a response to it. So the best way to communicate with me is just simply reaching out.
It sounds like there's a new, for me at least, there's a new path that I didn't feel.
It's not a new path.
I didn't know, so I appreciate it.
Chief, can I just offer an observation? You know, I work with a lot of boards and commissions. In over 22 years, I've worked with lots of boards and commissions, school district boards of trustees, and you know, and obviously the modality that you all employ ultimately to communicate among each other is up to you all. But I would note that, and then this is, I think your comment about formality sort of got me to thinking about this. The way that I've found has worked best typically when there's communications that are flowing is for the communications. And I hate to put it on the board chair because I know that the chair's got plenty of things to do. But ordinarily, the way that communicating with, you know, sort of outside agencies, with counsel, works best is when that communication runs through a point of contact, and that point of contact typically is the board chair, whether we're talking about a board of trustees, or we're talking about a commission. And again, I've represented a full range of commissions, from the Veterans Commission to, I won't start to try to articulate all of them, or all the districts or boards that have, but I just observe that because in some ways that ensures that there's an orderliness to the communications, and we kind of know who we're getting from whom, and it's been, you know, and as long as it doesn't run afoul of the Brown Act. If you've got, you know, multiple people who've kind of weighed in on something, it might be difficult to add one more person to send it along. But so you've got to count noses before you do this kind of thing.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think, for example, the request for information is a prime example of what John is speaking of, which is, it's important for us that when we get those requests, we synthesize it, and we have a process that we undertake to answer things, right? So if we're getting a response from one person and then we get another response from another, at times it's difficult to manage to say, okay, what was the date they asked for this by? What was this? When was that? And so I would agree that I think that if it can come through the chair, it does help to synthesize information. If it's something that for me, I have to reach out to one of my team members to find an answer to, that allows me to be able to do that. If it does require a much more formal request and a more formal process for us to then transfer that information back to you, then we're comfortable doing that too. So I do appreciate that very much, because I think that is a good, I think that's a good kind of illustration of kind of like the best way that it could work, and that it's really focused in those questions come in a way that, you know, offers some consistency.
If I may, when I was in the Juvenile Services Division, you might remember this, we actually had that in place because we were experiencing that. We were getting a lot of different commissioners reaching out, and it wasn't very efficient. And so it was, when I was there, everything was going through Tony. Do you remember that?
Yes. Well, and that's how, and so I haven't burdened him. So I just sat on my questions, right?
And that was happening before, because I would get someone would reach out to me, someone would reach out to Melanie, and then we'd be doing different things, not knowing that there was different requests coming in. So it was in place. I don't know what switched.
So, okay, I want to make sure Wesley gets a chance to ask a question also, so all commissioners do. But go ahead.
I just wanted to attest to the fact that I experienced Chief Keen's formality. It took me over 2 years to get him to go from calling me Miss Swope to Susan.
Yeah, I try to be deferential with people I respect, not to be condescending or whatever. It's just, I mean, it's just genuinely who I am. So when I ask for things a certain way, it's not because I'm somehow trying to undermine the process. I think that it's important to be able to know where things are coming from, how many different people are asking the same question. If I respond in one way to one person versus somebody else, those inconsistency matters. So.
Thank you, Chief. I know we're coming up close to 2 hours for the meeting, which is normally how long the meeting lasts. And Commissioner Liu is the last commissioner to have a chance to ask a question. Would come all the way around the circle, so I want to give him that chance.
Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to thank all of you for coming. I know many of you probably have families to go home to, and I don't know, maybe not sitting at a board meeting at 7 p.m. at night might be a preference for you. But my question is simply this: do you foresee a way that project change and course offerings, either through the community college district or the Board of Ed with Shelley, is there a way to extend that at the Y?
Oh, absolutely. So let me say this, and thank you very much for because I would be remiss if I didn't talk about project change when we're sitting in this room. One of the things that we are most proud of, and one of the things I take a tremendous amount of personal pride in, is the growth of project change within our organization. Katie Bliss is a force of nature, and what she was able to encourage and inspire us to do 2 months into my term as probation chief has just morphed into something that's, you know, hopefully just really the seeds that will grow even greater. You know, the legislation that came forth last year that has produced opportunity for not only project change to grow, but for these other variations of class offerings that will come from the state. The Prison Education Project, many of the programs that are happening at a lot of the UCs, where people who have been either formerly incarcerated who are now on college campuses thriving, or then in turn are becoming ambassadors coming back into our space. So PEP, for example, we have a relationship with them now where they're coming on the weekends, and we're hoping that they're going to expand their programming to do life skills and to do additional trainings. I just testified at a Senate subcommittee hearing last week on this very issue, encouraging the budget chair in that space to look for opportunities to, one, grow traditional education models at the secondary level, so at the college level, because they are, quite frankly, they are burdensome and are a hindrance to the growth of programs like Project Change. Ironically, the conversations we're having here today about having, you know, appropriate staffing and things of that nature, those things are influenced by the traditional models of how higher education picks professors, for example. We know that, as Shelley mentioned, we have 2 offerings that are happening, right? But all of us agree that we would like to see full course options that are offered, where not only where the young person is able to start those programs in the facility, but actually able to come out of the facility, then step right into the classroom on the campus. So our goal is to see that happen. And so we have been committed from day one We use our own funds to enhance the use of computers, and we ran our own internet in this space. We didn't use outside funds for that. We did it ourselves because we were committed to it. And we're continuing to be committed to it. I travel the state now and encourage others to look at what Project Change, the College of San Mateo County, and probation has done collaboratively to try to create a path for others. I'm very proud that the funding for this is modeled off of what we've done here in this county. I think that speaks volumes for what we've accomplished, but there's still a lot more to do, a lot more to do. So our goal really with not only just in conjunction with secure traffic for just a little bit longer, but in the bigger model of providing long-term education, my vision is that we will have multiple classes, multiple curriculums running at the same time, in person and virtual, and in a way that with young people, when they leave our facility, they don't have to start again, or they won't have that credit somehow diminished in the eyes of a professor or someone else. So those are our goals, and we're committed to that. We work closely with Nick to do that. We're just also incredibly proud of him, to see him in that space and to know what he's accomplished in his own personal education journey. And our hope is, and my personal hope is, that he's a model for our young people, just as Katie was. She was a model for our young people in that space. And so I think my advocacy across the state, my advocacy at the legislature, and I think the things that I've said in our space are indicative of my desire for this program to grow and frankly continue to be a model for everyone across the state, if not the nation.
Thank you for that. And if I may, I'd like to ask just a quick question. Melissa, sorry. Commissioner Wilson and I are working on a project about transition plans and transition.
Yes,
I was wondering if we could request through the chair, of course, a transition plan withholding any legal information that needs to be withheld so that we can better understand how that works.
So I think in our information that we have sent in, I thought that we gave you guys some redacted copies of transition plans. If we did not, we will.
We haven't received anything yet.
There was a thumbnail drive that we
That was a
received
completely separate topic. That was not.
Sorry, so we did send something to the JJDPC Gmail address. I don't know if that's on that.
Oh, I checked that inbox. When did you send it?
Yesterday evening.
Oh, okay, then maybe I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. So, well, sorry to step on you. I just want to clarify, right, as the group knows, there have been a number of requests we've tried to field as they come. So we've gotten PRA requests, we've gotten requests from JJC, we've gotten requests from JJDPC, and I apologize if I'm misstating the acronyms. And then, as you can imagine, we also have other pending PRAs and requests. So we're doing our best to try to respond in a comprehensive and accurate way as best we can. So, but I wanted to be clear that as we're sitting here, as far as I understand it, we have substantively responded to all the requests.
I'll check on the, sir.
We have not yet received a response on the budget.
And when was that submitted?
I think it was last month. I'm the one who called you at 7 o'clock at night and you answered the phone.
Right. If that's the one that's outstanding, I'll of course coordinate with Chief Keen, but I think he spoke to a lot of the issues. I don't think, and we have provided some information, and I think I did in fact provide a substantive follow-up letter. I apologize, I have all these tabs open.
The last we spoke, so you don't have to search, the last we spoke, you said, okay, now I have a better understanding of what you need. I'll get back to you, and that's where we left it.
Well, the short answer to your question is we certainly saw that request, and we did see the request for transition plans, and we did make the appropriate edits that we
necessary. So sorry, Chief. So we had two responses. We had one April 6th and then a second one on April 12th that I sent to the email address we directed to was Johanna.
That's me.
smcjustice@gmail. So we've actually responded twice to that request. So
but we've had a conversation since then because your request referred me to the website.
Right. So that was it. That was after the initial response. Then I sent a second letter and I pointed you to a number of different things. The BSCC website. There was also.
I didn't receive that.
Okay. Well, we sent that to your email. We also referred you to the Open Checkbook San Mateo County portal.
Would you resend that, please? I didn't receive that.
Okay,
Thank you.
I can resend it, but I want to make sure that we did submit it on April 12th.
Thank you.
Do that. Thank you.
We have a list of questions for you, Chief.
So many more.
Yeah, and we've gotten to like 8 questions, and I'm wondering if we can.
Can I address that, Paul?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I was going to say that we appreciate the time that you spent with us here today, and all the other time that you're spending, responding to requests. I know we're up to 2 hours, which is normally how long we last. You've given us a lot of information and a lot to think about, and that's our primary job, right? Is to inquire, gather information, make recommendations to the board, to agencies that we work with, and so on. So we appreciate you taking the time tonight, and like I want to sort of end where we started, which is that we hope we can have an ongoing dialogue, and it doesn't have to be an hour every time and this many questions, if we can get that ongoing dialogue going.
Well, I think what I would like to suggest is that I know there's been a request for a couple of meetings with Assistant Chief McCaskill and I. I think that's always a good way to get specific questions answered. We will make ourselves available to meet, at the office, Redwood City, whatever the case may be, to answer those specific questions. I think, once again, providing these questions in writing, we can respond in writing to say, here's our answers to these questions, and we can go for that. So, I mean, we're comfortable doing that.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you spending the time.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, was the agreement now that those requests would come directly through you to kind of avoid, I sent it to this email, I sent it to that email? Was that the agreement?
I think we can talk amongst ourselves as commission to figure out how to do that. We understand your need to have some streamlining it to make it efficient. Yeah.
The way our commission works is some of us are like chairs of certain ad hoc committees, so there may not always be a time where it's going to come through the chair. It just depends on how it's organized.
As well as the community, sometimes many of us have different relationships with different parts of the community, and sometimes they press us to ask questions, and some of those questions I wasn't able to ask tonight. And I'm happy that we had council here today, just because I wanted to just fill some of these policies out, but we've run out of time, and hopefully the chief and I work together in other capacities. And I'm wondering if going through Monroe every time I had a question, or if a community member had a question, is like, what's the format for a community member or a leader of an organization may be coming to ask? I don't think that we come to a certain channel, and I think we represent different parts of the community, and that would kind of complicate things, especially like when there's a pressing question regarding some of the litigation, for instance, that we've been forced to try to answer out there.
Well, but let me say this very matter of fact, and I'm glad you broached that subject. That's not something we can talk about. We're pending litigation. We're not going to sit and be asked questions that frankly we're not in a position to answer. So, I mean, I think that—
What question, sir?
Just general questions about what's happening within the litigation. I know that there is a conversation to be had from the committee, the subcommittee of the ad hoc committee around the sexual assault prevention group. I know there's some conversations we're going to have about that, but I'll also frame those conversations and say there's things that about litigation we're not going to be able to talk about. And so I think that's really important for us going into those conversations so we don't waste each other's time.
I think everyone understands.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, I hear that, but I think at the same time, the broad statements are made that just, once again, are not consistent with that. I mean, because I think if for example, a person who's part of a commission is also an individual. Let me say that. Right? You're also an individual person, and so you have relationships with people outside the space and whatever. But I think when there's a confusion between which hat you're wearing at that time, it can be difficult to then determine how you respond in that space. I mean, I think there are avenues in which are open to individuals because you sit on certain commissions, you sit on certain things. If I have a personal opinion about a piece of legislation, I don't go to the dais and say, I'm John King, Chief Probation Officer, San Mateo County, and use that and say, but these are my personal views. I don't have the ability to do that. And so I think that when it comes to a general member of the public asking a question of me, my email is a public email. So I get emails all the time from members of the public who ask questions about things. And either I can answer it based on what they ask me, or at times I can't because of confidentiality concerns or things of that nature. So it just depends greatly on the situation. So bless you. So I understand what you're saying. A general member of the community is always free to email me. It's a public email. It's a public email.
The report of the public.
Yeah, the report is a public email. So like I said, I get emails all the time from people asking a myriad of different questions about what we do, how we do it, how do we spend money on certain things, and whatever else.
And I don't want to beat any dead horses, but I was just listening to my colleague Peter sort of talk about even just trying to keep straight what requests we've got, things like that. And so again, I continue to make a pitch for the extent to which things can be consolidated and sort of routed in a particular way. It's just going to be easier for folks at probation to sort of keep track of what we're getting and making sure that we're responding. That's my sense.
Like I said, I understand the need to streamline. I've worked in large organizations, so I get that. But we just need an opportunity to talk amongst ourselves about how best to approach it. And again, I want to say you've given us a lot of information, a lot to think about. We appreciate it, and we will get back to you. And we look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
It's good seeing you all.
All right, thank you all.
Make a motion to
Commissioners,
extend
commissioners, I have in the past put times on the agenda to say we would end at 7:15. I kind of stopped doing that because it was too hard to stick to certain time. But we are at 2 hours. I think we only have a few other items that are on the agenda, but I would entertain a motion to table those items until next month.
Could I just make one?
Or a motion to extend the meeting.
I'll withdraw my motion to extend the meeting with just a statement. Please sign up for inspections. It's inspection time.
Good.
It's in the Google Drive. Please sign up.
Thank you.
Yes, I believe.
That sounds like
You have to talk to me.
consensus that we should adjourn the meeting now. Is there anyone?
Are we doing the close?
No, it's not on the agenda. All right, commissioners, not hearing any objection, I will adjourn the meeting now. Thank you, everyone. Good night.